Hi there, my name is Eric, and this is a presentation on your mode dial and your camera. Most cameras have 5 different mode groups. There's full auto, there's the movie mode, there's the scene modes, there's the semi-automatic modes, and there's manual mode. Full auto mode is usually a green rectangle, and it controls all of the camera settings. When you're using full auto, you typically don't have the ability to turn flash on or off. You don't have access to many of the menu features, exposure compensation, exposure lock. ISO may be unavailable or may be auto. The camera makes all these decisions for you. So the shot on the left was done with full auto, shot on the right was done semi-auto with flash. Full automatic modes may underperform compared to what you can do if you use other shooting modes. It's a good idea to learn a few tips and tricks that will help you unlock the potential of your camera. Consider shooting in other modes. Video mode, of course, is all about taking videos, and it allows you to shoot in movie format. Size, frame rate, quality of movie, all those things are dependent upon a number of factors. Those include the performance ability of the camera, the amount of memory on the flash card, the speed of the flash card, and the parameters that you select. One of those parameters is the size of the video. You can pick on some newer cameras 8K video, ones that are a little bit older 4K, and then before that and other choices include high def, 2 choices, and VGA. Now the thing about choosing smaller formats is they do allow you to have more time on your card. So instead of going for a 10-minute video, now you've got 20 minutes or an hour or 2 hours. Smaller sizes and slower frame rates do allow you to shoot more video. The problem is that as you decrease the size of the video, the quality of the video decreases. Smaller images don't look so bad. You can get to a point though where even a small image is going to look lousy. It really depends on what rate you're choosing. Your best plan is to play with it and see which one suits you best. The scene modes are those ones with the little pictures on them, typically portrait and sports and landscapes. You want to pick a mode which corresponds to your shooting situation. The portrait, of course, is for taking pictures of faces. Typically that means low apertures and flash and pleasing tones. Sports gives you high ISO, so you get faster shutter speeds, no flash. Landscape gives you smaller apertures for better depth of field and improved colors for vegetation and water. And then there's macro mode. Macro is all about taking pictures of things up close. Now, the thing about macro mode that I find amazing is people think of macro mode as a chance of shooting things close, but there's just so many problems with macro mode and getting close. What macro mode does let you do is, yes, you can focus close, but you can't always do it in a way that is going to allow you to get a good shot of your critter or flower. So the one on the right is using dedicated macro equipment, which does a much better job because you can shoot from further away. Semi-automatic modes includes a P, S, and A. Those are program mode, shutter priority mode, and aperture priority mode. These give you full access to all of the camera's features. Program mode is a little bit like auto in that it chooses aperture and shutter speed for you, but you can change those settings by using the command dial. You can also choose auto, ISO, or pick an ISO if you want. Shutter priority is another choice where you select the shutter speed and the camera picks the aperture. The one that I'm going to spend most time talking about though is aperture priority, because it's the one where you select the aperture and the camera picks the shutter speed, and there's a number of advantages to that. So what's the one thing that keeps most people from using those semi-automatic and manual modes? Well, it is the fact that they are afraid of doing something that will affect their camera and is irreversible. So your camera is equipped with reset menus that will allow you to return it to factory settings. So my recommendation is go into those various different things and play with them. And if you do something that you don't like, reset it and see what happens. And then go back to your automatic modes when you're not sure about what it is that you're doing, so you can get your pictures, because it'll reset everything by itself. Now, one of the things that most advanced amateur photographers do is they shoot in the semi-automatic semi-automatic modes. Okay, the problem with the semi-automatic mode is that when you select it, things like ISO are set at whatever they're set at. So if it's at the wrong setting, you're going to want to change that. That's the same thing is true for automatic ISO. It might be turned on and maybe you don't want it. What's the white balance? Is it auto? What's the size setting? You should be set to large. You might be interested in shooting RAW. That would be a decision you should make. Quality should be set to fine. Flash can be popped up or not popped up depending upon what you need. Exposure compensation should be set to 0. Okay. You can change all of these settings through your I or Q menus on most modern cameras. Some of the older ones you don't have that, so it's going to be menu or button operated. Manual mode is another one of those things that people tend not to get too excited about, too interested in, because you get to set shutter speed and aperture independently of each other. Now the problem with this is you can set the shutter speed by rotating the command dial, but if you've only got one command dial, how do you set the aperture? And that's done by pressing the exposure compensation button and turning the command dial. And if you look at the exposure compensation button, there might be a little picture of an aperture beside it. Manual is useful in situations where lighting is consistent but exposure is very widely. That's because what's going on in the background. The mode is frequently avoided by many budding photographers, and yet it's got so much potential. I shoot a great deal in manual mode. It allows me to capture images, what I'm doing and what's going on. This is a stitched image that I put together. Manual mode is great because it solves all kinds of particular problems. And if you want to do a stitched image, for example, manual mode is the best way to go because you don't get exposures that are all over the place as you scan through an image. Aperture priority, though, is probably the #1 choice for most people that are comfortable with their cameras. The benefits include the fact that A, all camera functions are available. B, depth of field is often one of the major considerations, and by picking your aperture, you're picking depth of field. If you want the fastest shutter speed you can get, you pick the lowest aperture setting, and if it's not fast enough, then you bump up the ISO. And you are always going to get a corresponding value. Now, without going into a lot of detail, if you're on aperture priority, you're always going to get a shutter speed. If you're on shutter priority, you may not get a functional aperture because it's just not available. So, and there is that ISO idea where you can always bump up your ISO to get a better shutter speed. Well, these are all photographed in aperture priority mode. And I use this most of the time that I'm shooting, although my second favorite is certainly manual. So shutter priority does have some values. For example, it's useful when shooting with flash and you want to pick lower shutter speeds. That helps with getting background so that they're not so dark. Presence of underexposure bar is there in the viewfinder. So if you're looking through the viewfinder and you're paying attention, you can see that there might be an underexposure bar that pops up if there's not quite enough light coming from the background. It's also great if you want to maintain a minimum desired shutter speed. And so one of the things that I do is I go to shutter priority and I turn on pick a shutter speed like a 1/15 or maybe even an 1/8 of a second, depending upon what lens I've got and how stable I can manage to be. And when the light is really good, I pick shutter priority. That gives me my minimum shutter speed, and I get a little more depth of field out of the equation. These are all photographed in shutter priority mode. I want to point out that these are all with flash. So the best plan here is to take photos the way that you normally would, but go out of your comfort zone and try some new mode settings. Take 2 photographs. The first one would be the way you would normally do it. So this is how I take a picture. The second one, do yourself a favor and try a different mode. Okay, if it doesn't work out, that's okay. You got the first shot. Review them later and discover what the differences are. Learn about how to use other modes, including some of the modifiers such as exposure compensation, exposure lock, and slow shutter for flash. Keep in mind you can always return to your area of comfort. Learning is best done by stretching yourself. Thanks so much for looking at this. Check out some of my other videos. Thanks so much again. Bye.